This is Michael Blackstone with LeeTalkRadio, and today we are privileged to have Congressman Morgan Griffith with us. And welcome to our show, Congressman. And would you be preferred to call Congressman Morgan Griffith? What do you choose?
Morgan works fine.
All right, Morgan. So let's get for those that are in our listeners that may not have the privilege. We know who we elect and who's representing us, but a lot of times they don't have the opportunity necessarily to get up close and personal with our elected officials. So tell us a little about Morgan Griffith. How'd you get into politics? How long you been in? Basically, what are you doing? And so we get to know who we're talking to and so on.
Sure. I started being interested in politics as a kid, and then when I got myself trained, I'm a big believer that God gives everybody talents and skills, but you need to enhance those. And for whatever reason, God gave me the ability to talk, and I just love law and politics. So I went off to be trained, starting at Emory and Henry College, where I did 4 years, and then Washington and Lee University School of Law. Appalachian School wasn't open yet, so the one that was closest to where I lived, and I grew up in Salem, have lived most of my life there. I've had a 0 to 1. I was elsewhere, but from one year on, I've been in Salem, and came back home to Salem and practiced law, and then got into the House of Delegates, and then in 2010 was elected to represent the 9th Congressional District in Congress. I'm married, and I have 3 children, and they're all doing well. I started late, so I have a stepdaughter who is almost 22. She'll be turning 22 here in another month, and she is currently attending a chiropractic school in upstate New York. She went to Virginia Tech undergrad. My boys are 16 and 14, and both of them are in school at Salem.
Awesome. So you've got you not only are you represented in Congress, but you're also you've got a family, a growing family. So you're right in the thick of all of the stuff that every normal parent out there has to deal with on a day-to-day basis, which is very refreshing to know, because then that gives you, a lot of times, you take advice from people who or get information from people who have never done what they're talking about. So this is nice to know. Lee Talk Radio is for Lee County, Virginia. Primarily, it's the voice of the people, and we get out information and stuff to the folks here in Lee County. Even though it is primarily for Lee County, we cover Southwest Virginia and things, because we're intertwined in a lot of different things, government-wise, economically, and so on throughout this whole area. So, in the subject of Lee County economic development, tell me about what is going on, or what you've had to do with abandoned mine, the land economic revitalization programs, and how is that specifically helping our people in Virginia?
Yeah.
Lee
so
County.
what happened was they created this program for the abandoned mine land economic revitalization program. They call it now. It used to be called the Abandoned Mine Land Pilot Project. To his credit, Hal Rogers, just over the line in Kentucky, created this program, but he created it only for Kentucky, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, the 3 states with the most abandoned mine land. And when I saw that, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. While Virginia may not have as much, our section of Virginia, down in the old coal mining areas and the ones that are still active, but particularly the ones they mined in the early part of the 20th century and the late 19th century, said, we've got probably just as much per square mile as they have. We just don't have as many miles of it because the rest of Virginia didn't do mining. And so I put in for $10 million a year. I had to fight for that. And because we couldn't do specific projects for your district at that time, I had to create this anomaly where I said it's the second tranche. And so I actually got money for Alabama and Ohio as well. And in fact, a couple of years after the program started, I needed some assistance making sure we could keep it going. It was again, I needed to do another amendment on the floor. And so I got my colleague from Ohio to help me out. And he says, well, we're getting $10 million a year. I said, yeah. I said, I got that for you. He said, well, thanks. I'll come help you fight for it. So we've been able to keep it in there, and it's going into its 5th year. And it brings in, a fair amount of money. And what we do is that local governments or others can propose projects. It goes through what used to be DMME, and I forget what their new name is. They changed the name. What's it called? Virginia Energy. But it goes through them, and there's a committee that has Southwest Virginia people on it, and a representative from my office, and then people from the state, and they go through the various projects and decide, where we should spend the money each year. But we've done all kinds of things, and in Lee County, that includes Project Thoroughbred, which uses grain from Lee County farmers and others for brewing and distilling. They're putting a terminal in Norton, which is also part of that. Then $500,000 for the Lee County Indoor Farm Greenhouse Project, and $1.5 million for Lee and Buchanan counties growing hemp commercially while improving environmental effects of acid rain drainage. But it also does things like closes off mine portals. And in Norton, we took down the high wall so they can put in an industrial development park and hopefully bring in some jobs. And they've already got one employer who's locating there. And then some of it is tourism. While not in Lee County itself, the Devil's Bathtub is something that a lot of folks go to, and a lot of folks from Lee County go to that, as you know. And so we're working on a project there as well, closing off the mine portals. I call them entrances, but for the official parlay or parlance is to call them mine portals. But it closes off old mine entrances, and then at Devil's Bathtub, we're creating a parking lot. Not a big deal, except that they weren't going to be able to do it without some money from this program. So we're trying to spread that $10 million around in the areas that used to mine in Virginia, in Southwest Virginia. And I've been really proud of that program from an economic development standpoint, because it'll take a while to bear fruit. We've got one over in Russell County that's going to end up being 2 different industrial parks side by side, over 200 acres. And while, again, that's not directly Lee County, you and I both know a lot of people will, when they start creating those jobs there, and I'm told there's a prospect at one of those parks in Lee County, one of those industrial parks at Lee County, they've got a real hot prospect. It's nothing official yet. But every time we bring in more jobs into the region, there will be some people from Lee County who'll be willing to drive over there when the wages are good.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. And this may not even be something directed at you, but in the county here, and they've got development underway. Our lower end, we call it the lower end or the west end of the county. This is the farthest end of the county that borders Tennessee, which you're going to go into right. Harrogate there, LMU, right. and then Middlesboro. So that end of the county. That is, we have infrastructure issue there where sewer water is needing to get out there. It's our most logical growth direction for the county.
It is. So, I will tell you that we worked with the Army Corps to get a sewer project. I worked behind the scenes really hard with the Army Corps to get that sewer project they put in from Harrogate up to the veterinary school area there in Ewing. And we're trying to figure out, we're doing some behind-the-scenes finagling right now to see if we can't get that extended even further. But you're absolutely right. That there's some beautiful land out there, but it's also an area where you can see some real potential for growth. And I think Lee County, that's a real asset for Lee County, and I think it's an area where we can have growth. And anything I can do to help move things along there, I will. As far as the AML money is concerned, and this is the pilot project money, not the traditional money that was out there. But if somebody has a proposal and there's some abandoned mine land that we can improve, I would say get it with the county folks, talk to my office, and see if we can't put that on the list of things that will be considered in the next amount of money that comes through.
So let me ask you this question, because you answered exactly where I was going with this. I recently did an interview with Richard Johnson, who is the director at the EDA here in in Lee County. And, one of the things we talked about was this specific subject. And, he said the Army Corps of Engineers has their own timeline. They are not one to be push, rush, this, that, and the other thing. However, this project and this kind of stuff has been going on for a considerable amount of time. So my question to you would be, what can you do to help accelerate that? I mean, is it going to take the next 5 years or the rest of our natural lives to get this done? Or is something that you can do in your position push these guys a little bit faster, a little bit harder than maybe our local county government is able to do?
If they've got something specific, I meet with the Army Corps every year to talk about projects. If they've got something specific, we can work on that, and I know that my team has in the past, and part of what we're working on right now is apparently the money for all of that has not been reauthorized since 2007, so we're working on a reauthorization, and we think we can figure out some language that will allow us to expand that. But if any ideas that individuals or the county government has, or the EDA, bring it to us. And what we did on this Harrogate project is Harrogate to Ewing, we worked behind the scenes to make sure they knew that was a top priority for us, and it got done. Now, 5 years is probably realistic, so I don't want to mislead anybody who might be listening. That being said, I hope a lot longer than 5 years, so I don't think it'll take our natural lifetimes.
Exactly. So at the county level, are you saying that there is financial things that need to be done to what did you say?
They just need to bring it to our attention and let us know what they're looking at and what they consider their priority. And they may have told my team that, because my team has been coming to me with ideas over the last, having nothing to do with this interview, over the last couple of weeks. It's because there are new bills coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a new WRDA bill, which may or may not help us. Then we have we're expecting in the next, either this next year or the year after that, a new, what we call T&I, Transportation and Infrastructure Bill. And there's some places in there we can tweak some language and try to help communities in Southwest Virginia, even if it's just tweaking it to say, they can continue working on, and then we have to fill in the project number or something like that. That kind of stuff then helps the Army Corps, because they then have authorization. Sometimes they feel they don't have the authorization to do as much as they would like to do. I mean, I have found them to be, they do work on their own timeline, but I have found the Army Corps that works on these issues in our area to be helpful. Doesn't mean I always agree with them, but they really are trying, I think, to help the area. They just have a different timeline than you and I might like.
Right, I understand. And the average person, in the general public, that has no experience in dealing with these kind of matters. So they, when we think of something, we're thinking of, all right, let's get out and dig a ditch and put in a pipe. You know what I'm saying? And
I do.
That's the level of that's just the way that most people look at it in the general public is why can't it be done? Why is it taking longer? There's lots of moving parts in all this. I understand. We want to make sure that everybody across the state understands that Lee County is where Virginia begins. It's not where it ends. It's where it begins. And we want that infrastructure here so that when you step foot one toenail into Virginia, you're coming into Lee County, and we want the infrastructure. We want that growth, and we want to be able to push across this region. And I'm sure that's, a lot of you guys' way you're going to have opportunity as well. Let's switch subjects and talk about our hospital.
Yeah.
The reopening of our hospital. What did your office have involved in that? And just give me your thoughts on that whole program.
From day one, folks in Lee County and Terry Kilgore, all of those folks were keeping me advised. In fairness, I was a little shocked when it shut down, because we had a meeting in August. And let me say that the two senators, even though we're in different parties, the two senators and myself have worked on this from the get-go on the federal side. But the local government the hospital board, and I forget the official name of it, but the one that took over when the hospital closed, the state legislators, we all worked on it together. And local government and state government did more. I don't want to take anything away from that. I've always been very strict in my office. We don't take credit for things we didn't do. What we did do, though, is we kept the pressure on. And like I say, the two senators and I were working together on this. We kept the pressure on to get something done, to get it reopened. We had a couple of failed attempts, as you know. We had a company that came in and wasn't successful. But we kept pushing, and we kept saying, when you need us to get you the licenses that are required in order to get Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement and the hospital designation, et cetera, we will be there to help, and that's what we did. We followed through all the way, which is why you had, Mark Warner and myself both showed up for the opening, because in D.C. we did not worry about party politics. The hospital was never a partisan issue, and what we did was we did everything we could do at the federal level. Now, that being said, I don't want to take anything away from the folks in Lee County and the state legislators who truly, Bill Carrico, Pillion, Kilgore, everybody worked their tails off to have that thing happen, and it would not have happened without us all agreeing that we were going to work together side by side, and each team was going to do their share and what they could do, and we were all there from the beginning and all supported each other, and I think that was very helpful.
I think it's done wonders for our county, and credit and acknowledgement to Ballot Health and their organization who have helped on that side of things, and then all the state folks, county folks that you've mentioned. There was several years we were all sitting on the edge of our seat waiting, and there was some challenges. So I'm glad to hear that you guys, especially from the federal level on down, was exacting the right kind of pressure and unity and getting that going. Let's talk about a couple things. You are on the federal level, so let's talk about some national issues. As Republican leader of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, tell me what you're doing, what that committee does to the elephant in the room, finding out the origins of COVID-19. What are we really doing there? I know we see everything on various levels of news medias, national news media and stuff like that, but it's just one-liners, short stuff. Tell us what's the meat and potatoes behind this.
Well, the meat and potatoes is we don't know for sure. I'm convinced it was a lab leak at the Wuhan lab. I'm convinced that the NIH and Dr. Fauci's group, which is a sub-part of the NIH, which is allergies and immunizations, I think they were a little bit negligent, and, of course, they've done a lot of other things, but just on the origins, they contributed. They didn't mean to. I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything intentionally, but they gave money to a group called EcoHealth Alliance. EcoHealth Alliance then did a subcontract with the Wuhan lab. Our representatives at the National Institute of Health knew or should have known that lab was not rated as secure enough to handle a virus that could cause death in humans. It just wasn't. It does not have the international standard. It did not meet that standard. Why we were giving them money is something that I want to investigate, and I want to bring in we don't have control right now, so I can't bring them in until I get the gavel, but I'm hoping I'll have the gavel this time next year. And I will have to bring in the appropriate people, including Dr. Fauci, and ask them under oath what in the heck were they thinking. I will also find out why Dr. Fauci in particular. This does not reflect on the NIH directly, except that he is an employee of the NIH. Why he got on in a conversation to try to mislead the American people, because from the very beginning there were two theories: an animal or a lab leak. And they led everybody to animal, which was not unreasonable in February of 2020. But then they said everybody who thought it might be a lab leak, they were wrong and they weren't following the science. Well, the science has led us back to a lab leak. And the animal theory is highly unlikely. But Dr. Fauci was part of a conversation where they intentionally diverted people from looking at the Wuhan lab. And I want to know, was that because you knew that your agency negligently was allowing money to flow to that lab when they didn't have the proper security measures to protect an escape of a virus that could kill human beings?
Let me ask you a question.
Yep.
There are actually two questions, and if you can confirm these, fine. If this is something that you want to wait till after you get into some of these investigative hearings and stuff you're speaking of, then that's fine as well. Is the Wuhan laboratory primary function to build weapons?
No, it is not. Now, is there a possibility that the Chinese Communist Party may be using some of their research at another facility, maybe even located within Wuhan? That's something we'll have to look at. But the lab where this research was being done was not one that was looking specifically for weaponization.
Second question, does George Soros own or have money involved in that lab?
I do not know. We have not seen anything that would indicate that, but I will tell you that the Biden administration is not cooperating with our minority investigation, and we don't have the power of subpoena yet. When we get control next year, assuming that we do, we will subpoena these records, and if we have to, we'll go to court. I think the Biden administration has more information that we have not yet discovered. We're getting little bits and pieces. I did think it was interesting the other day because Jim Jordan, is the ranking member on Judiciary, was talking about stuff, and everybody acted like it was new. And my subcommittee's investigation had that stuff 6 months ago, but nobody pays attention when we do news releases because we don't have that name profile, which is understandable. But I thought, well, isn't that interesting? But the business, dealing with the Wuhan lab, we're right on top of it, and our investigative team in the committee is ready to go, and we're going to break some eggs, and we're going to knock down some doors to get the answers. The American people deserve the answers. I don't believe it was weaponized. I don't believe it was intentional, but it clearly was negligent, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Amen to that. So what's your personal view on vaccines and masks and mandates? Those are loaded topics.
Let's start with mandates. I do not support mandates.
Good.
I think that's wrong. I think everybody has to make their own decision. Masks do not appear to be very effective. Some of the N95 masks will help protect you a little bit, but really isn't going to do a whole lot to take the virus out of circulation in the general population. So I think we've probably overdone masks, particularly the cloth masks have basically no impact based on the science we're seeing. And as far as the vaccination itself goes, I think they're relatively safe. There's no 100% guarantee, but unless you've got something else going on in your system. My son one time when he was a little kid, went into anaphylactic shock from we don't know why, but it was right after he took a vaccination for MMR, the measles vaccine. And so for years we had to do it very slowly and check everything out. So sometimes different people react differently. But I've been studying mRNA technology for years because they were actually developing it for another coronavirus, that would be the flu. And it has great potential to make our flu vaccines much more effective because right now the flu vaccine is only about 15 to 40% effective, depending on what year it is, because we have to develop them so early because the process we're using now is very slow and it uses eggs. And both my son and I have had an egg allergy. I don't currently, but he has one, which means that I very rarely get the flu vaccine and he's never had it. That would be my older son. And so I've been studying this technology because it's a way to protect him as we go forward from necessarily having the flu. I think I've had it so many times I've built up immunity, particularly as a kid. But that being said, I studied it at length, and I have always felt very safe with it. And so I made sure when I got vaccinated, and I am vaccinated and boosted, I got one of the mRNA because I trust that technology. It doesn't last that long in the body. It's not going to cause any genetic deformities. How much it helps? Well, that's questionable. But it does appear to at least reduce the level of the symptoms. And we've all known somebody who's died of COVID. I had a friend pass away within the last week. And I want to make sure that at least the decision that I made, and I think it's a personal decision, was I want to make sure that I'm knocking those symptoms down as much as I can.
That's awesome. I think that I agree with you 100%. It should be a personal choice. It should be something that you talk to your medical doctor, get the best thing for you. Those are the people on the ground that are most familiar with you as a person, as a body, and can medically help you in whatever is available. So two last things. I know we're getting close on some time. Something that affects and has affected and even been called the scourge of the Appalachians. Our county's been affected, and many across the country. But specifically here, tell us about your bill to fight the opioid epidemic, and the Insuring Compliance Against Drug Diversion Act of 2021. How it became, I believe it recently became law. Explain in basic terms, how does that affect people on the streets, and what is going to be accomplished there, so that we can all have relief from this scourge, as it's been nicknamed?
Well, and look, it was a good little bill, and I liked it. I'm not going to tell you it's going to stop the scourge of opioid abuse. But what it did do was that we had a situation where if you were selling your pharmacy, you also sold your DEA license and your ability to handle sometimes dangerous substances like opioids. And prior to my bill, if you sold it, there was no checking on the new person. So pharmacy, number one could sell their license to pharmacy number two, and nobody ever checked the principals out to make sure that they weren't bad actors who had done something in the past. Never had any of those cases in our area, but it was just something that this was a back door that was left open, and we wanted to make sure we shut it. I do have a bill that's actually in part going to be up today and is in the hopper that we're looking at. But we're trying to force it on the floor today. We're probably going to lose it because it's a Republican bill. But this one would allow us to make all of the analogs permanently of analogs of fentanyl. It would make them permanently a Schedule 1 unless we can later discover that there's a medical use for that's legitimate. There are some 4,000 different possible analogs, and we've studied 30 of them in the United States. And what the Chinese and the Mexican cartels are doing is they can change the analog just slightly, and then they can claim it wasn't one of the substances on the list. We have had a rolling, where we make them rolling Schedule 1. In other words, every few months we vote to say, okay, we're going to do this again. And right now it ends in February 18th. I think it ought to be permanent. And also a part of the bill says that for scientific research purposes, we're going to lower the barriers on doing research on Schedule 1 drugs so that our institutions of higher learning that are doing this kind of stuff under protected circumstances in the United States can do the research to see if there is something of medical value in one of the analogs. And that's just changing the formula slightly. It's still fentanyl, but it's a slightly different substance. And we need to make sure that it's illegal until we prove that it's got some value to it, because otherwise the criminals will take advantage of it. And that is it has become a huge problem nationally because people are getting hooked on this stuff. Sometimes they lace it in marijuana, cigars, or cigarettes just so they can get you hooked. It's nasty stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping
Absolutely devastating for sure. Glad to hear that strides are being made forward, and I wish you success. I know that these, whether they're Republican or Democrat, I mean, us people that are out here living, just like you and your family, when the proverbial stuff is hitting the fan, and we're having to deal with things in our day-to-day life, which we're not thinking Democrat, Republican, Independent, or the man on the moon. We're thinking about living in life, So I appreciate knowing that. Last question I want to ask you: all over the country, cops are getting shot, people are getting killed. This whole wave of defunding police and all of this utter nonsense. Tell me your opinion on all of this.
I think you summed it up. Nonsense.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And we're dealing with a bill right now where instead of funding our regular law enforcement, get this, they got a bill up where they want to fund the Nancy Pelosi and company. They want to fund a climate officers. They want to create a law enforcement division for client officers. I think there's another word. I want to say it's control, but I don't think that's right. But, they're looking to do climate officers, but they don't want to take care of officers who are looking into people who break the law, kill police officers, hijack cars. I mean, sometimes they don't even want to prosecute people who are, break into your house and steal stuff in some parts of the country. Not in Lee County, not in deep Southwest Virginia, but we've got some in Northern Virginia who just don't want to prosecute some of these things. Well, that's a property crime. They broke in and stole all your stuff. What? It's crazy. They want to defund the police and they don't want to prosecute crooks. Give me a break.
Well, it's always that whole subject of take the guns away and all of that things. And let me tell you something. When you are having some thug or bad actor crawl through your window and rape your daughter or your wife or something like that, believe me, you want every one of those guys wearing that badge, or anybody with to be able to come and protect you. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely, you want them to have the equipment they need to do their job.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had in Southwest Virginia, Lee Scott Wise counties primarily. I mean, we've been blessed in our county. I think a lot of people, the majority have good respect for our officers, the sheriff department, and our sheriff does a great job with what they do, trying to liaison and be fair and respectful to the general public. There's law and order. They got to do their enforcement and stuff, but they're very respectful and stuff of people. People do, we all make wrong decisions. And we have to move through that and beyond that. But one county over, we've had numerous shootings. We had an officer that was killed. I mean, and so those kind of things, it makes you stand up and open your eyes. They are coming closer. And so the swirl of all of this other complete chaotic nonsense going on all over the country, which is what we see on TV, is not necessarily hit the streets, but one county over, it has. And so that's kind of a scary idea. What federally can you guys do to help county law enforcement? These guys are underpaid. I know it's all regulated by the state and all that, but in our county, we're losing our population. When we lose our population, this doesn't turn into go from a farming community to a bedroom community. It turns into ghost towns because we don't have funding for. It affects our school budgets. It affects our law enforcement budgets. How many officers our sheriff can put out on the streets per capita of people? All of this. What's the feds doing? How can we get help and get it soon?
Well, what we can do, probably the most help, is to provide equipment, and that is something that we can do. We can put money in there for providing equipment, allow police officers in sheriff's departments to purchase equipment from the federal government. That is, the federal government's already paid for it, and sometimes they decommission it or whatever, but it can still be used in our counties, and we ought to facilitate that as much as we can, and that's what we ought to be doing. And then sometimes we will have special programs where we can underwrite an officer for a few years. We also have things like the high-intensity drug trafficking area program where we put extra undercover officers into various areas. Not every county is able to participate in that, but where we can do it, then the bad guys don't know necessarily who's coming after them, and a lot of times it may be a federal officer or somebody the feds are paying to come from a different district so that the folks who are in your county won't recognize them. Because in small communities, it's pretty easy to figure out who the sheriffs are, who the sheriff's deputies are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's things like that we can do.
Congressman Griffith, I'm going to give an end note here on Constituent Services. So to all of our listeners, Congressman Griffith's office is available to assist constituents dealing with federal agencies, including issues with Social Security, Medicare, veterans benefits. You can call their office at 276-525-1405, or you can visit his website at morgangriffith.house.gov. I really appreciate your time you spent with us today. I hope we can have you back soon. And good luck on everything that you're doing. Safety to your family. And thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you very much. Glad to be with you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.